Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. Today's date is June 18th, 2013. I'm your host, Rob Dew, and it is a pleasure for me to be presenting the news to you today. And here is a list of our top stories.
Tonight on the Infowars Nightly News, another government drill sees NORAD take over the skies of D.C. Then, the NFL sacks your privacy with their Clear Bag campaign. And Edward Snowden confirms he is not a Chinese spy. All that and more coming up on the Infowars Nightly News.
The bad people want your info! What is your problem?
Well, from the league that brought you TSA pat-downs before you entered their games and drones in the skies and a continuation of the See Something, Say Something program, the TSA combined with DHS has now decided to ban bags at their games. That's right. You will not believe this. This is from Don Salazar. NFL to enhance public safety by implementing clear bag policy. I can barely say it because it freaks me out so much. In an effort to enhance public safety and improve stadium access for fans, the National Football League is getting set to ban all bags and purses that are not see-through in its 32 stadiums across the U.S. There's an FAQ at the NFL.com/all clear, appropriately named, a cynical play on the military term which represents a signal when a threat of danger has passed is all too obvious. They're actually going to have a buffer area of bag police there. Okay, so now we have bag police to be checking on things. There will also be a secondary perimeter where agents will be scurrying around telling you not to bring bags in. And I think it's just very apropos if you scroll down in the article and look at, you can actually see pictures on NFL.com's site on their own store where they sell bags that are not even see-through. So they're selling these $30 plus bags that you will never be able to take and bring in to show your support for the team. Not only that, it gets worse. On their FAQ, there's a question. And there's the picture right there of the bags that you won't be able to take in to their stadiums. Are seat cushions allowed to be carried into the stadium? This is right under the pictures here. No, they are not, due to their large size, because of the way seat cushions are constructed, would allow them to be used to conceal a potential explosive device. Well, let me just say this. Thank God they've implemented this. So now they can't launch a false flag of a seat cushion bomber. That's the only plus I could think of them not having seat cushions at NFL games. Let me tell you, I've been to a few NFL games. The seats are not very comfortable. And now you won't be able to bring your favorite little cushion to sit on with your team logo. Pretty soon they're probably going to outlaw team logos. They're going to say that could be seen as a terrorist threat. I'm not kidding. Moving on, this is that was a Don Salazar story, by the way. Very good. By the way, Kurt Nimmo writes the next one. NORAD's Falcon Virgo exercise rolls out today in D.C. On June 17th, the Office Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs announced NORAD exercise for Washington, D.C. to be held today, June 18th, and tomorrow, June 19th. Exercise Falcon Virgo is designed to hone NORAD's intercept and identification operations. And you know how well that looked and that worked during 9/11. And what I like about this article, it goes through a whole list of how the NORAD stand-downs took place and the people that actually brought that out. In the section, previous exercises did nothing to prevent 9/11. It concludes with Secretary of Transportation at the time, Norman Mineta's testimony before the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks, where he talked about on May 23, 2003, he said, "I was made aware of it during the time that the airplane was coming into the Pentagon. There was a young man who had come in and said to the vice president, the plane is 50 miles out. The plane is 30 miles out. And when it got to the plane is 10 miles out, the young man said to the vice president, do the orders still stand? And the vice president turned, whipped his neck around and said, of course they still stand. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" That was my Dick Cheney impersonation. Mineta's testimony was also corroborated by Counterterrorism Chief Richard Clark and also reported by Bob Woodward. And so it concludes, no number of carefully planned and closely controlled exercises will prevent another 9/11 attack, as the Pentagon claims. If NORAD is ordered to stand down as it was obviously was on September 11th, 2012. So that's what it goes back to. This article is kind of like, well, here is a piece of information that's new, and then what we do at Infowars is try to go back and point out where the government lied to you, where they tried to mislead you, and especially with that whole NORAD timeline of when they knew, when the FAA informed them, was there a stand-down order, why were the jets sent across country where they couldn't be of any help. You know, there's all kind of stuff going on with 9/11. I encourage you to look at it if you don't know anything about it before you call me a crazy conspiracy theorist. Moving on, this was out of the Drudge, posted on the mercurynews.com. Most workers hate their job or have checked out, Gallup poll says. The survey classifies 3 types of employees among the 100 million people in America who hold full-time jobs. The first is actively engaged, which represents 30 million Americans. I'm included in that group. I feel like I'm actively engaged here. The second type of worker is not engaged, which accounts for 50 million. That's sort of your bell curve, your average people who just kind of show up and go through the motions. And the third type, they're actively disengaged. They hate going to work. These workers are about 20 million, undermine their companies with their attitude, according to the report. Gallup estimates that workers who are actively disengaged cost the U.S. as much as $550 billion in economic activity yearly. The level of employee engagement over the past decade has largely been stagnant, according to the researchers. And that article, just reading that, prompted me to say, well, why do we have these 20 million people that are actively disengaged, coupled with another 50 million people that are just kind of showing up and going through the motions? Why do we have that? Well, yesterday we reported on a story out of the CPA Practical Advisor. Ex-McDonald's worker sues franchise that required fee-based payroll credit debit cards. And we posted this on Infowars.com. The lady filed the suit, Natalie Gunn Shannon, who was an employee at McDonald's, was given, they wanted to give her cards, pay her on these debit cards. The suit seeks an unspecified amount of monetary damages on behalf of employees and asks the judge to award punitive damages against the company for its ill-gotten gains contrary to justice, equity, good conscience, and Pennsylvania law. So the way it works is like this. They give you a card, which conveniently is all the money is deposited into a JP Morgan Chase account. Then in order to look at your card, in order to pull money out, in order to transfer money, they all have these fees. And I'm going to go over the fees right now. This is what it is. The JP Morgan Chase payroll card carries fees for nearly every type of transaction. According to the lawsuit, including a $1.50 charge for ATM withdrawals, $5 for over-the-counter cash withdrawals, $1 to check the balance, 75 cents per online bill payments, and $10 a month if the card is left inactive for more than 3 months. For just by doing nothing, they're going to charge you $10. That's going right into Jamie Dimon's pocket at JP Morgan Chase. And this is not just going with McDonald's. And I have a McDonald's story after this last part here. Walmart is also doing this. The largest private employer in the U.S. switched to paperless pay in 2009 with about half of its 1.4 million employees receiving direct deposit and half receiving paycheck cards. The Home Depot, Lowe's, UPS, FedEx, and hundreds of other large companies use payroll cards. The Chicago public school system uses them to pay more than 4,000 student employees. What is this doing? Well, it's giving the banks access to your money, because they're going to be able to take out all this money in fees. It's also training people to be part of the cashless society control grid, which wants to do away with cash so all transactions can be monitored. So maybe the NSA could take a sneak peek at their, you know, if they want, they could do that. Here's my little McDonald's story. Back in 1991, seems so long ago now, I was an employee at McDonald's. When I started, minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. I started off working as a cook. I moved up to cashier. About 3 months into my employment there, oh yeah, there it is. Visions of the McNugget tray go through my mind right there, eating the silicone. They took me in for an evaluation. They said, we're going to evaluate you, and you've been doing great. You've progressed. You know how to use the cash register system. We could put you in any position here, but you haven't worked here long enough for a real raise. So this is what we're going to do. This has actually happened. They gave me a 1 penny raise, 1 penny per hour. I went from $4.25 an hour to $4.26 an hour working for McDonald's. How do you think that made me feel? kind of made me feel actively disengaged. Yeah, I didn't feel like that guy. I didn't feel like a crack clown. I felt like a piece of dog meat. I'm like, here I am busting my butt, helping this company make money, taking people's orders, not messing them up, doing a good job, reliable, showing up on time, staying late if needed, and I get 1 penny per hour raise, $4.26. And that wage of $4.26 stayed on my paycheck till I stopped working there. I was making $4.26 an hour. From there, I moved to being a closer because I'm like, you know what? If I'm not going to get paid for kicking butt and doing a good job, I'll just go being a closer where I don't have to work as hard. Therefore, I became one of the actively disengaged. Now, we're continuing with this meme of the fiscal cliff. That's a very interesting graphic there done by Marcos Morales. Out of Forbes, here's another reason why people are actively disengaged. Half of college grads are working in jobs that don't even require a degree. So after getting all of those loans, paying all those fees, now they can't have a job that helps them pay back that loan, which I'll get to in a second. Nearly half of college grads from a four-year college are working in jobs that don't require a four-year degree. Grads from public universities are 11% more likely to feel overqualified than those who went to private schools. And this was done by the consulting firm McKinsey. The Bureau of Labor Statistics number underlines the McKinsey findings. They're saying 48% of employed U.S. college grads are in jobs that require less than a four-year degree. So they tell you, all through your public school training, you got to get into college, kids. College is where it's at. You want to be able to earn a living, don't you? You want to be able to get that TV and go on those vacations and go skiing and buy a boat and buy a big house. Well, you got to go to college. If you don't go to college, you can't do any of that. What was that? Oh, that was some magazine art. Oh, that was from our magazine crew, and you repurposed that. Awesome. Which brings me to the next part. Student loan defaults rising despite a way out. And basically, it's those who are 90 days late on their student loan payments. They've gone up to 11.7%. But the actual delinquency of those that are in their grace period or their deferment periods is up to 30%. This is a study that the New York Fed found. And from 10 years ago, 2004, it was only 20%. So it's jumped 10% in 10 years. And here's a statistic I was blown away by. 2011-2012 school year, students and their families borrowed $76 billion to pay for college, according to the Pew Research Center. And that's just 1 year. Americans owe nearly $1 trillion in school debt. And there you can see down by the numbers, the chart that we just showed up on screen that has the breakdown. So we have 70 million people disengaged, pretty much kind of floating around in their workspace. Why? Because they're in jobs they don't want. They're jobs they're overqualified for because they've been sold this dream that, you know, you have to go to college and you have to be in debt in order to make any money. And, well, another reason is, as we go to the Atlantic, America Jobs Dilemma. Employment up, but wages are down. So we're working, more people are working for less than there were. Isn't that amazing? Employment increased nationally by 1.6% or 2 million jobs in the year September 2011 to 2012. But weekly wages for the country as a whole declined by 1.1%. That may not seem a lot, but that is big if you accumulate that over the year and throughout the nation. This is one of only 6 annual average weekly wage declines since 1978, the report notes. Wage declines above all industries, save for the information sector, saw a modest increase of 1.3%. Employment increased nearly 84% in the largest counties over the same time frame, yet among those largest counties, nearly the same percent saw over the year declines in average weekly averages. So we've been sold by our controllers, by the banksters, that we have to, that if we do a good job, if we work hard and we play fair, we're going to get that golden spoon. We're gonna be able to afford all those things that they show us on TV. But in actuality, the now deceased George Carlin put it best by saying this.
Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it. Because you have to be asleep to believe it.
That's it. The American dream is fake. It doesn't exist. The bankers have stolen it from you. They are the real owners of this country, and they're going to do what they want unless we wake more people up and we turn this thing around. That's the only thing that's going to change. We have a new film coming out called State of Mind. It's a DVD from the guys who did Oklahoma City, A Noble Lie. This is 10 times better than that, and that was a great film. They really did a lot of research, really got the interviews. This, they went even one step further. They reinvested the profits from that into their next film, which is what you should do if you want to be a filmmaker. But for a limited time, and we're going to play the trailer here in a second, Alex is going to talk about it. When you get State of Mind, you order that. We're also going to throw in American Dream, Fighting the Lying Liars, One Stupid Lie at a Time. And this is about a 35-minute documentary on the Federal Reserve and how it was into being, but it's done animated style. And it starts off with a guy who loses his house, loses everything. The bank is foreclosing, and he thought he was getting the American dream. But remember, you have to be asleep to believe it. So we're going to go now to the trailer. And when we come back, I'm going to have a little bit of a message on Operation Paul Revere, a quick update for everybody out there. So stay tuned after this trailer.
Infowars.com, because there's a war on for your mind. That has been my maxim since we started Infowars.com back in 1996, because there is a war on for all of our minds. Advertising is a basic form of propaganda, but there are dozens of other types of even more sophisticated. And most of the public is not even aware that this is happening. The new documentary film, State of Mind, is incredibly well done and goes over the history, goes over the crimes, goes over the things that have been committed by our government and other governments, and how that system is now being deployed against us today. It is such an important documentary film, and it's vital that everyone see it so that people be aware of the fact that manipulation of our psyche is indeed going on. In fact, this film is so important, it's so key, that the general public who is sleeping see it, that I'm doing something we've never done before when we offer a new film. And that is offer another free film with it. Because it's important to know who controls the brainwashing and programming system in the mainstream media. The private, globalist-controlled Federal Reserve. The animated film An American Dream documents in a compelling but also humorous fashion how the private families that control the Federal Reserve took over our world. It's key to understand that they are using the technology of mind control to dumb down and keep the general public in the dark. And that's why for a limited time, when you order State of Mind, the full-length documentary film at Infowars.com, you will get American Dream, Fighting the Lying Liars, One Stupid Lie at a Time, absolutely free. 2 films, 1 price, exclusively offered at Infowars.com.
Are we choosing our own paths, our own destiny, or has it been pre-selected for us?
C.S. Lewis said, when training beats education, civilization dies.
We need to always be cognizant of, as a free society, that information can be used as a weapon.
Barrier to discovery is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge.
We are seen as nothing but biological androids.
To gain control of education in America, not for a philanthropic purpose, but to change the thinking of the American people.
From the time we're very young, we're taught to, worship authority, basically, because that's our key to survival as young children.
Discover the history, the present, and the future of mind control. From compulsory state education to the Hollywood media brainwashing machine, we are kept in perpetual bondage to the ideas that shape our actions.
In the CIA, scientists could actually film people who had been surreptitiously dosed with LSD.
There's a brain entrainment process that takes place.
That gives the government free rein to create whatever story or narrative it wants to create.
Whatever the public face of something is, whatever they're talking about publicly, there's something else over here they're probably not looking at.
How to engineer the opinion of the American people so that they would fully endorse, not only endorse, but demand a war.
When you watch mainline establishment television, you are putting yourself in front of the barrel of a gun.
Discover the history, the present, and the future of mind control, psychological warfare, brainwashing. Are we controlled and manipulated? You bet.
That's mind control
par excellence.
Find out how deep the rabbit hole really goes with this new groundbreaking documentary film, State of Mind. Available exclusively at Infowars.com.
We are in an info war. And that's why I am promoting and distributing the film State of Mind. So for a limited time, when you get the new documentary film, State of Mind, at Infowars.com, you will get the animated historical documentary, The American Dream, absolutely free. A powerful combo guaranteed to expand your awareness and wake up your friends and family. Pre-order State of Mind today, exclusively available at Infowars.com and InfowarsStore.com. Secure this powerful tool in the fight for liberty at InfowarsStore.com. And when you get State of Mind, you will also get the animated documentary historical film, American Dream, absolutely free. And you'll be supporting Infowars.com and our media operations as we attempt to expose the globalist at a higher level. And you'll also be supporting independent filmmaking and the great work of these filmmakers. Now is the time to set brush fires in the minds of men and women everywhere. Now is the time to declare war against every form of tyranny over the mind of man, as Thomas Jefferson said. Because tyranny starts in the mind, and breaking that tyranny also starts in the mind. Get this documentary today, exclusively offered at Infowars.com.
So there you have Alex Jones explaining why he got in with these guys to help them promote their film, because by promoting works like this and other people's films, we're all going to wake more people up, and that's going to change our country. So we don't have to make films about this. We can make films about art or nature or, you know, other things in the future. But right now we do have a job to do, and that is to wake people up to what is going on, to the real controllers, how they're being programmed, how to break their programming. Because a lot of people, you know, they'll lose hope. They'll be like, oh man, all this stuff is bad. What do I do? You become independent. Okay, that's how it is. You break yourself away from the system. You say no. And that's what we have people doing across the country. We're going to get to that in 1 second, but I have a quick update for Operation Paul Revere. So in January of this year, we launched Operation Paul Revere, the $115,000 video contest. And like I said, next week we're going to put out our list of the top finalists. We're going to break them down by category. At that point, we're going to let you guys provide feedback. But even before we do that, we do want to hear from you. We want to hear which ones were your favorites, because maybe we missed something. Maybe somebody saw a video that they didn't quite agree with, but if you guys out there point it out, well, maybe we'll put it in with the finalists. I mean, this is where we're going to grab all the ones that we think are really good and put them out there for everybody to see. We're going to build some playlists on YouTube. We're going to have a list of them on a big page that we're going to build. That'll be next week. But there's the email you want to send it to. You put favorite in the subject line. Send it to paulrevere@infowars.com. Okay, just send us one. If you want to send us another email with another one, that's fine. But just send one video at a time. Don't send us 15 videos, because then we're not even going to look at your email. One video. Send us one video that you like, that you think is the best out there. Because we like to hear your input. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of great patriots that have put these videos together, that put them out there. So send this out. Send this out to your list. Get people involved. Get them activated. paulrevere@infowars.com. And we're going to have that list of finalists up next week. Probably next Wednesday, maybe next Thursday, probably next Wednesday. Now let's go and talk about some other ways people are protesting. We go to Turkey. Now, out of Reuters, police arrest dozens in raids across Turkey after protest. Police raided addresses across Turkey on Tuesday and detained dozens of people after nearly 3 weeks of anti-government protests, the local media reported. Turkey has been rocked by demonstrations that begin in and around Istanbul's Taksim Square that turned violent after police sought to clear protesters using tear gas and water cannons. Why were the protesters there in the first place? Does anybody ever ask that? Is that even in this article? No, it's not. Basically, these developers wanted to come in and cut down a bunch of trees in Taksim Square. And a bunch of people said, you know what? We don't want you to cut down these trees. These are protests that are happening everywhere. There was one in Germany a few years ago where these people said, no, we like this 100-year-old forest. We want to keep it. And they chained themselves to the trees and had to sit there and fight it out with these loggers. I'm not saying it should be like that everywhere, but this is a public place. This is not private property. So The people have a right to say what they want to do with their public spaces. Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan said in a speech on Sunday before hundreds of thousands of protesters in Istanbul that the disturbances have been manipulated by terrorists. I would say different. They're manipulated by police using tear gas and water cannons on people who weren't being violent, on people who were just stating their opinion. And when they started beating them with batons and shooting rubber bullets at them and hitting them with tear gas and water cannons, well, they reacted. And that's the reaction that police brutality usually gets. People usually do start turning violent when you start hitting them with a stick. They don't like that. But in a turn of events, out of The Guardian, Turkish man inspires hundreds with silent vigil in Taksim Square. This guy, this is what he's doing. This is the way to do it. You stand up against the machinery and you refuse to comply. Erdem Gündüz, dubbed the Standing Man, stages 8-hour vigil and is joined by 300 people during a silent protest. A Turkish man has staged an 8-hour silent vigil in Istanbul's Taksim Square, the scene of the violent clashes between police and anti-government protesters in recent weeks, inspiring hundreds of others to follow his lead. By 2 a.m. on Tuesday, when the police moved in, about 300 people had joined him. 10 people who refused to be moved on by police were detained. But that's what you have to do. Sometimes it takes a detention. Sometimes it takes getting arrested for standing up for what you believe in. And especially as long as you're nonviolent, you're going to be in the right. In the end, the people will be with you. Now, we see this going on across the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, going into Brazil. From the New York Times, thousands gather for protest in Brazil's largest city. Protesters showed up by the thousands in Brazil's largest city on Monday night in a remarkable display of strength for the agitation that began with small protests against bus fare increases, then evolved into a broader movement by groups and individuals irate over a range of issues, including the country's high cost of living and lavish new stadium projects. That's what happens when you have socialist government. You get lots of stuff for the rich people and not a lot for anybody else. But they don't tell you that when they're selling it to you. They tell you everybody's going to get a little slice of the pie. Yeah, you're going to get a slice of the pie that you can't even see. It's smaller than that. The demonstrations in Brazil intensified after what? A harsh police crackdown. Last week stunned many citizens. In images shared widely on social media, the police here were seen beating unarmed protesters with batons and dispersing crowds by firing rubber bullets and tear gas into their midst. We actually have some video of that we can go to. And this is kind of what happens. When police start beating up people who are being peaceful protesters, they get irate. And when you start sharing those images across social media, well, they're going to get more irate, which is going to lead to more police crackdowns, which is what's happening in Turkey. But isn't it interesting how you have two different countries on two different sides of the planet, both have harsh police crackdowns when they're staging protests, and the protests get bigger and turn into riots. This is coming to the United States, okay? You may not see it now, but this right here, this is what's coming. In fact, if you were in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in September of 2009, you saw pretty much the same thing, except they weren't shooting rubber bullets at us. They were just firing tear gas and using sonic weapons. But this is coming to the USA, mark my words. This is what's going to happen as long as we let the people, the bureaucrats, stay out of control and stay corrupt. Moving on to one of our final stories, this is out of ABC. NSA Leaker Edward Snowden, I'm no Chinese spy. The 29-year-old former NSA contractor made the quip during an online question and answer session hosted by The Guardian. He said that the U.S. calling him a Chinese spy is a predictable smear meant to distract from the issue of U.S. government misconduct. And that's what happens. You attack the messenger. You don't go, hey, maybe we should look at the NSA and why they're spying on millions of people without a warrant and no due process. No, no, no. We're going to attack the guy that actually came out and said it. He said, I've had no contact with the Chinese government. I only work with journalists. Here's what President Obama had to say about this, and also Snowden's comment on what Dick Cheney said about him being a traitor.
Should he be prosecuted?
I'm not going to comment on prosecutions.
Okay.
The case has been referred to the DOJ for criminal investigation.
And possible extradition.
Snowden denied he was a spy and said being called a traitor by former Vice President Dick Cheney over the weekend was the highest honor you can give an American.
The highest honor you could get, being called a traitor by Dick Cheney, who is a traitor and who should leave this country. Actually, should stand trial for the war crimes, especially his involvement in the stand down in 9/11, amongst other things. But that'll never happen because Dick Cheney is privileged and you're not. I got one final article, and this was brought to me by my son last night. He came up to me and said, Dad, there's a lake in Pflugerville, and they found a barrel of toxic waste in it. It was actually labeled hazardous waste. They pulled a 55-gallon barrel that was discovered in Lake Pflugerville, which is, that is the water supply for Pflugerville. They get their water from there. The reason I bring up a local article about, the local water supply is there's one thing you can do to make sure you're getting healthy water, and that is to get a ProPure system. I told my son, hey, we have a ProPure system at our house. Yes, we're pouring tap water in, but you know what? Anything bad in there is getting filtered out. Now, I don't know if it's going to filter out hazardous waste. It doesn't look like that's going to be a problem, but it prompted him to be concerned. He saw that on the news, and he said, Dad, I'm worried. They said they found a white barrel and it had something on it. He wasn't sure, he doesn't know what hazardous waste means, but he said there was something on it, and they said it was bad and that they were analyzing it, but they weren't sure if it broke open and if it contaminated the water supply. Well, by having a ProPure system, you're going to be better off than most people. Say there's a contamination of algae, which happens in some water supplies. Say they put too much fluoride in or put too much chlorine in, or God forbid there's some sort of like natural gas or gasoline that gets into the water supply. Sometimes this stuff does not get filtered out. In addition to all the other stuff, the ProPure filters also filter out the pharmaceutical products, all the other crap that gets into our water supply from people using Big Pharma's system. So I encourage you, if you're out there and you haven't got one yet, do get the ProPure system. We are now offering 10% off, which we have been offering this for a while, with promo code WATER. So be sure you do get one. And we end tonight with the quote of the day from our president back in the 50s, Dwight D. Eisenhower. I don't know the number he was, but I know he was like 50 to 54. If you want total security, go to prison. There you're fed, clothed, given medical care, and so on. The only thing lacking is ... freedom. That's right. You want total security, go to prison, because you're not going to get it anywhere else in life. Democrats will have you believe otherwise. They have you believe there's TSA agents everywhere sticking their hands down your pants, we'll all be safe, but that's not the case. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider becoming a member of PrisonPlanet.tv. It's very easy to do. All you go is to PrisonPlanet.tv. We have a 15-day free trial, and you can share your username and password with up to 11 other people. So do that today. If you're watching this on YouTube, support the show, support the broadcast. It supports everything we're doing here. It supports building new studios. It supports flying people here. It supports getting the word out. And then you could go on and use Prison Planet as your own resource. You can grab videos. You can make your own videos. You can download the movies. You can download Alex Jones' radio show. I mean, we have it all there. The rants, the ebooks. Everything is there for you. PrisonPlanet.tv. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, Leanne McAdoo is going to be sitting in this seat, and she's going to interview Russ Baker, who's an author who wrote about the Bush family a few years ago. We had him here in studio, actually, a good number of many years ago. So it'll be interesting to see what they have to talk about. He recently wrote an article, and Leanne brought it to me and said, we need to get this guy on the show. We need to talk to him because he thinks Obama is a good man. So you'll get to see how that goes right after this short break.
Now you can watch Alex Jones live at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
You can also browse the network, the Infowars Nightly News,
and over 60 movies and documentaries all together in one place.
You can watch the Alex Jones radio show live as it happens.
So check it out, Infowars.com/show.
Are we choosing our own paths, our own destiny, or has it been pre-selected for us?
C.S. Lewis said, when training beats education, civilization dies.
We need to always be cognizant of, as a free society, that information can be used as a weapon.
Barrier to discovery is not ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge.
We are seen as nothing but biological androids.
To gain control of education in America, not for a philanthropic purpose, but to change the thinking of the American people.
From the time we're very young, we're taught to, worship authority, basically, because that's our key to survival as young children.
Discover the history, the present, and the future of mind control From compulsory state education to the Hollywood media brainwashing machine, we are kept in perpetual bondage to the ideas that shape our actions.
In the CIA, scientists could actually film people who had been surreptitiously dosed with LSD.
There's a brain entrainment process that takes place.
That gives the government free rein to create whatever story or narrative it wants to create.
Whatever the public face of something is, whatever they're talking about publicly, there's something else over here they're probably not looking at.
How to engineer the opinion of the American people so that they would fully endorse, not only endorse, but demand a war.
When you watch mainline establishment television, you are putting yourself in front of the barrel of a gun.
Discover the history, the present, and the future of mind control, psychological warfare, brainwashing. Are we controlled and manipulated? You bet.
That's mind control par excellence.
Find out how deep the rabbit hole really goes with this new groundbreaking documentary film, State of Mind. Available exclusively at Infowars.com.
The important thing about the Pro 1 filter today is that the material we use for removing fluoride and other heavy metals now will remove the latest form of fluoride called hydrofluorosilicic acid. There's no other fluoride reduction filter out there that will remove that type of fluoride. And it's extremely important because today we're hearing more and more cities are using that form of fluoride.
We've been having medication forced on us through the water system for quite a while. Most people don't realize it. Most people don't realize the negative effects of fluoride.
There's a wide range of health effects that are attributed to fluoride.
Bottom line, why should somebody get this new Pro 1 ProPure filter?
The reason to buy the Pro 1, it's an all-in-one filter. It's convenient, easy to use. It doesn't require the add-on fluoride filter. And in addition, this filter removes the latest form of fluoride called hydrofluorosilicic acid.
Today, I'm speaking with award-winning investigative journalist Russ Baker. He is the author of Family of Secrets, The Bush Dynasty, The Powerful Forces That Put It in the White House, and What Their Influence Means for America. Russ is the editor of news site WhoWhatWhy.org, and he is here today to discuss some of the topics his team of reporters are investigating, including the impending war with Syria, inconsistencies with the Boston Marathon bombing, and this whole NSA spying debacle, and why Obama can't undo the surveillance society even if he wanted to. Okay, Russ, so thank you so much for joining us on the Infowars Nightly News. We're happy to have you.
My pleasure.
So now we'll start with the Obama administration and the NSA spy scandal. Now, we've heard Obama say that he's going to get to the bottom of, some of the other scandals going on with the AP wiretapping, the IRS, Benghazi. Now he's saying that he's welcoming a debate into this new affront on the American people. Rand Paul says Obama is drunk on power. You say he is essentially helpless. Do you really think that Obama wants to stop the surveillance society that we have, if he could?
I can't read his mind. I don't have any real sense of what type of person he is after all of these years. And I think we're always sort of dependent on perceptions that are crafted by the electronic media. But my sense is that even if he wants to do something, and I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on some of the promises that he made when he was running for office, and in fact his criticism of George W. Bush on very similar surveillance policies, I think realistically he just can't do anything about it. In fact, that has been a theme in my work and in our work on WhoWhatWhy.com, that if you look back historically, you'll see all the way back to Franklin Roosevelt, He was basically warning that his hands were somewhat tied by people in the financial centers. He wrote a letter to Colonel House, the former chief aide to Woodrow Wilson. He said, "You and I both know that the real power in this country resides not in Washington, but in the great financial centers." Dwight Eisenhower, I think, was very much under the thumb of these same interests, and took a very bold move as he was leaving office with his famous military-industrial complex speech. So I think that all of these presidents essentially are very limited in what they can do. To some extent, they're actors chosen for their ability to perform publicly, and I think that whenever, on the rare occasion, we've had someone like a Roosevelt or particularly a John F. Kennedy who challenged these power centers, they quickly were put in their place, sometimes violently. I think that to some extent the range of the permissible is such that the people from both parties are essentially wings of the same party, and that they understand that that really all they can do is wiggle a little bit, and that's why you don't see huge differences in the kinds of policies, by and large, being proposed by cabinet secretaries and top advisors. I think that's just a reality, and so we certainly see that in carryovers. Even John F. Kennedy, many of the people in his cabinet were Republicans or were carryovers from the Eisenhower administration. It was just a shuffling, really.
Right. So I guess if Obama is blocked, then that means democracy itself is blocked. I mean, doesn't that signal sort of a problem?
I think so. In my book, Family of Secrets, I look at the rise of the Bush dynasty, and I connect it to all kinds of traumatic events in this country, including the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The issue is that we don't really understand these big events. We don't understand what is going on, and we don't really recognize domestic coups when they occur. This sort of thing causes dissonance with a lot of people who like to believe that this country is so much better than other countries that those sorts of things don't go on. But in fact, it's reasonable to assume that the very same people in this country who think it's perfectly okay to go into other countries and mess about with their democracies and overthrow their leaders would not hesitate to do the same thing in this country. I think because the stakes are so much higher and it's so much riskier, that those kinds of things are much more carefully planned and carried out. But I think that any person who becomes president would have to be a complete idiot not to realize that they are expected to do certain things.
Now, I know that WhoWhatWhy has been reporting for about 2 years, saying that the Obama administration was not to be trusted in giving the whole official narrative of why they want to oust Assad for humanitarian reasons. And so what do you think about the New York Times basically reporting that Obama finally had to succumb to tremendous pressure to get involved in Syria?
Right. Almost everything you read in the mainstream media are calculated leaks. So they start by leaking things that indicating that they're going to be moving forward with military aggression against the Assad regime, and then they leak that Obama didn't really want to do it. These are all calculated. So, for example, whether or not Obama wanted to do it, that leak, that last leak you referred to, is designed to mollify his base, those who still believe that he's basically a decent guy and that he still has some kind of power. And so it's very important for them to and so instead of him saying, I had to do it because the generals forced me or Wall Street forced me or what have you, he says, I had to do it because Bill Clinton pressured me, which is quite funny. And of course, that's setting up Hillary Clinton to run for president herself. But what really is going on is that none of those wars are about humanitarian things at all. They never have been. They never will be. Frankly, nor should they be. If you or I were sitting in the Pentagon or in the National Security Council, we were discussing what to do in other countries, we wouldn't be discussing human rights and how to make people in Pakistan happier and so on. We'd be talking about so-called national security, which broadly defined is what benefits the United States, which more narrowly defined means what benefits those who have the most power in this country. And that really comes down to a continued policy of a kind of an imperial approach. And the United States isn't alone on that. I think China and Russia and so forth, we're all battling for markets and resources. It's been that way since time immemorial.
Exactly. And so what do you think about the ties between the mainstream media and the Obama administration? the president of CBS News is related to his aspiring novelist turned deputy national security advisor, Benjamin Rhodes. So it seems like the mainstream media is sort of getting us warmed up to go to war with Syria, or initially it was Libya, and what do you think about that?
Well, that's quite right. In fact, I mean, I think we can see that the mainstream media has learned nothing from its errors and then subsequent mea culpas over Iraq and all the other things that they got wrong and how they were tricked, perfectly happy to continue along that path. And we see that with Libya on WhoWhatWhy. We've been I think we were quite early to that story and still are virtually alone in reporting that that was never about the Gaddafi policies towards his own people. It was always about other geopolitical and strategic considerations. We detail that quite heavily in an article you can find on the right-hand side of our site, WhoWhatWhy. Also, Syria, other issues in play, but again, strategic calculations. And the media, for some reason, I'd like to say it's inexplicable to me, but I think it's perfectly explicable. The way our media is structured, it's dependent primarily on funding from wealthy interests, from the patronage of wealthy consumers and so forth, and that really is where their bread is buttered. And so they're going to do some good reporting. There's no question. I mean, I've worked in the mainstream media. I have plenty of friends in it. I made a decision to leave it and to start WhoWhatWhy because I felt that we were constrained. We weren't able to tell the whole story. So you'll see bits of the story there, but you've got to really kind of step back and take your own reading to figure out what really is going on.
Right, and so you guys are doing a lot of investigative journalism and uncovering the news, basically the things that the news fails to report on or just kind of covers. For instance, you all are digging a little deeper into some of the inconsistencies with the Boston Marathon bombings. We've covered that here at Infowars as well, so what else can you tell me?
Well, sure. I mean, so we're sort of old-fashioned journalists. There are many outlets, of course, that comment on the news and express their opinions and speculate. We do real old-fashioned reporting, and so I spent weeks myself in Boston on the ground, going and talking to people. We have other people. We've built a team, other people working on the story, doing analysis, doing all kinds of things. And very importantly is that we go into these stories without an agenda. And now some people would say, yeah, sure, nobody goes in without an agenda. But to be a good journalist, you really have to do that. You have to say, I would want to know what happened there. I want to know if these two guys did it. I want to know if there were other people helping them. I want to know everything. I want to know about all these anomalies. I want to know why the younger brother, why they shot him so many times in that boat when, in fact, he had no weapon. I want to know whether he really scrawled a confession on the wall. How somebody who was so gravely wounded could have or would have been inclined to prop himself up and scrawl a confession. It makes you think that somebody thought that he was going to die. So, I mean, these are all very strange things, and somebody has to look into them. So our attitude is we're agnostic until we do our research.
So what are some of the other stories that you would really, if Obama could save himself and kind of gain a little trust with the public again, what are some of the stories you'd like for him to unclassify?
Well, I mean, as you probably know from WhoWhatWhy, we've been talking a lot about the remaining classified records of the John F. Kennedy assassination. Very troubling that there are still an estimated 50,000 documents with references or information that appears to be related to the Kennedy assassination that the government has held back. Here we are on the 50th anniversary of what the government has told us was simply a lone eccentric or perhaps nutty figure shooting Kennedy, that there was nothing more to that. If that's true, then it's hard to understand what could possibly need to remain secret 50 years later. And so we see with Obama him sort of continue again, like Bush and like other presidents, in cooperating with this what I guess you would say is a policy of assuring us that it's better that we don't know, that for democracy to work well, we need to be protected from ourselves. We don't have good judgment as to what it is that we can know. And of course, they're always referring to America's enemies, but I'd love for them to articulate who are America's enemies who would gain if they released all the records on the John F. Kennedy assassination.
So what do you think we would actually find if those documents were released?
Well, I was, again, agnostic on the Kennedy assassination, as I am on most topics, until I happened upon it in a sort of bizarre way while researching the Bush family and discovered that George H.W. Bush couldn't remember where he was on November 22, 1963. I decided to just figure out where he was, because I know that everybody over the age of 5 remembers where they were when they heard about the shooting of Kennedy. And so that took me down this kind of rabbit's hole, and I became fascinated with the Kennedy assassination. I spent some years on it and have actually about 5 chapters in Family of Secrets on the Kennedy assassination. I have become convinced that, in fact, that was essentially a coup d'etat, that, in fact, elements of military intelligence and of other spy agencies, the CIA and the FBI, at least were involved in covering it up, also involved with the autopsy in order to hide the fact that there were multiple bullets hit Kennedy from more than one direction, all of which points to the fact that it was an organized hit. And so I think that that is even shown from some of the documents that have already been released by the diligent efforts of amateur researchers sort of connecting the dots. And I think that whatever those remaining 50,000 are, they must be pretty explosive. I'd certainly like to take a look at them.
Well, I know we would all definitely love to get to the bottom of that story as well 50 years later. But now the New York Times has sort of said people who question the official story are just conspiracy theorists. So how do you reconcile that, being an award-winning investigative journalist? Now they're calling you conspiracy theorist.
Well, I don't know if they're specifically calling me that, but the general message has been put out consistently over the years, and they've stepped up the effort this year to sort of remind people that asking questions and not trusting the official story is dangerous. And so this term conspiracy theory is one that I personally abhor, because it's actually too useful words. Conspiracy meaning 2 or more people getting together to commit a crime, which is not a fantasy, it's a reality, and it's prosecuted in courthouses throughout the country on a daily basis. And theory, which is how we learn and how we come to understand things. So conspiracy theory really ought to be a neutral term referencing attempts to understand how crimes are committed. And it's sort of tragic that that term has been taken over. It's now what you might call a dysphemism instead of a euphemism. It's a word or a phrase that automatically sort of taints whoever you apply it to, and it just shuts the discussion down. Now, I'll be the first to say that I am not a fan of those who believe that there is something sinister going on with everything that that person themselves is not involved with. I don't think that's healthy, and I think there's been too much of a growth industry in that in this country. But I do think that we have to go in with an open mind and accept that sometimes people in the government are doing good work, and exactly what they tell us is the truth. I think it's very, very important to appreciate that the government is full of millions of people just like ourselves. But at the same time, be open to the idea that there are individuals, whether it's in the civilian parts of the government or the military or the CIA or in private industry or in nonprofits or anywhere else, who have untoward agendas. And I think that that's the important thing. And I think that places like the New York Times, which sort of disparage people who want to know, could all of these shootings throughout America's history, could they all have been lone kooks? When we look at other countries, we see that most of them eventually are settled as having been hits by powerful interests to remove people. And the idea that none of these people, whether it was Martin Luther King or Robert Kennedy or John F. Kennedy, or even statistically, if you look at small plane crashes, statistically, a disproportionate share of those are labor leaders and sort of liberal politicians. That's actually a fact. Or they're conservative politicians who fell afoul of their buddies, people who were on the Warren Commission, people like John Tower. It's a fascinating subject, and to think that nobody would ever be requested or inclined to go and take a screwdriver and loosen a bolt in an engine or something? I mean, that's preposterous. And what kind of journalists just dismiss any consideration of these scenarios? I would say that they are the ones that are irresponsible.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that irresponsibility in journalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. You know, journalism is like anything else. It's funded largely by wealthy interests and by the capitalist system, and that means that there are going to be limitations on what people can report. Those of us who've worked in the mainstream media know that we try to do the best job we can, but we understand their limitations, and we self-censor, or our editors, in usually only slightly subtle terms, inform us of when we've gone too far. I remember one story, an editor said to me, go out and bring me a big story. I brought him something which I thought was very big. He looked at it and he said, that's too big.
So Russ, you covered the fall of communism in East Germany, and you likened the fall of that surveillance society to something that we could achieve here in the U.S. How so, and do we stand a chance?
I think my point is that I and many other people have grown increasingly nervous as we see our so-called enemies having become freer and freer, and us become less and less free. There's a certain kind of an irony and a paradox in that, of course, and some poetry as well. But I think that these measures that are being taken increasingly to supposedly protect us do not protect us. They essentially enslave us. I think they have a very hard time showing us that we are safer, showing that even if we are safer, that these kinds of measures and this kind of total surveillance of all of society to catch a few people is actually worth it in the long run. If you ask people, would you give up your freedom to ensure a slightly lower risk that you will be blown up? I don't think people would. And I think we need to have a vigorous discussion about that. I also think that we need to acknowledge that there are people in this country in positions of power, great wealth and so on, who are less excited about democracy than they say they are. That they were supporters of fascists and others, perfectly happy with a Pinochet or a Franco, and so their commitment to democracy is something that I would question. And I think that when they're pushing for knowing more and more about us, and at the same time paradoxically telling us less and less about our own government, we have reason to be deeply, deeply alarmed. And I mean, I do support having security measures that are necessary, but I think we need to have much more accountability. And I think that one of the things I saw when I was in East Germany, I referenced this briefly in a recent article on WhoWhatWhy, is that I was there literally before the wall came down, and I saw when there was a break and there was a sense that they could be free, that individuals began stirring and they began taking action. And I saw young people who would put on ski masks and then get on buses and hand out leaflets. And I attended a meeting with a Christian church leader there and his congregation, where sort of a covert meeting where they began discussing what they might be able to do and so forth. And it was very exciting to see. And I think it's sad that in this country more people don't step up and do something. And it's really not enough to just sort of complain. You have to get involved. And the reality is, if enough people made their voices heard, went out in the streets, were more active on the internet in terms of sharing important articles with other people, I think at some point the elected representatives would have to respond to that, would have to listen, and we might have a real fighting chance to preserve democracy before it's too late.
Well, I agree, but I wonder, do you think that we're a little sort of trapped because everything is so electronically, connected now, and that's sort of being spied on, and with, Google algorithms and things like that that can sort of steer which way things get shared? Do we need to unplug and just get back to the word of mouth and handing out leaflets?
Well, I mean, I think we do need to try to appreciate the joys of life, which include actually being with people in the flesh, saying hello to neighbors on the street, that it's not the same thing as bragging about how great your vacation was on Facebook. I think that we need to unplug a bit, as you point out. I think we need people, unfortunately, who can have the same electronic skills that the others have to maybe help us find ways to protect our own privacy. And I think that, very importantly, we need to be more suspicious of all of this technology as just being something good. I particularly am struck by the younger generation and its enthusiasm for everything. I think these things like Google Glass are real violations of our privacy. And I think that the fact that we don't hear more young people saying these are bad developments, I want to stop it. I mean, you know, there could be boycotts of Google and Apple and all of these things if people cared enough. And I think those companies would respond because, after all, they're for-profit enterprises.
Well, that sounds like some really good material for a new book or a whole nother new book. So what are you working on now?
Well, I don't formally announce books until I get at publication or close to publication, but I could just say that some of the topics that we discussed here today are definitely things that I'm looking at. I feel like I've got a whole bunch of books in me, and the real problem is just time constraints.
Exactly. Well, Russ, thank you so much for continuing to investigate and uncover the news. I know there's obviously, as we have proven here today, there is so much more news that remains to be answered. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, well, if you'd like to continue supporting alternative news, please consider signing up for a prisonplanet.tv account. You can share your username and password with up to 10 other people, which means 11 people can sign on simultaneously. Now join us here at the Infowars Nightly News 5 nights a week at 7 p.m. Central. I'm Leanne McAdoo signing off for the Infowars Nightly News. Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.